Well, I've only been foreshadowing tackling this game for at least 5 years now, since the ending of Dragon Warrior 1. Hello everyone, and welcome to Let's Play ActRaiser. Finally! Let's get right on started with a new game and have to enter our character's name. This doesn't actually matter too much in the long run, doesn't influence anything aside from what you get called in the game. I was actually tempted to go full out religious with it, with like, Yaldabaoth, Demiurge, Baal, weird angel names throughout the years. But considering the fact I first talked about this game back when I first did Dragon Warrior 1, I'm going to use the name I used for the protagonist in that. Are you awake? Sir Moyle. I am the angel sent to help you recover your lost strength. Now all types of monsters are in control of the earth. This all came about because of a demon they call Tanzra, the one who sealed your power. In order to restore your power, you will need to rekindle the people's faith in you. But first, let us go down to the earth and destroy all monsters that we may establish a peaceful land for our people to dwell in. Okay, they just kind of throw you right on into it, but first things first I'm going to do is actually set the message speed to its fastest. And now let's take a look around the world. We start off in the area of Fillmore, but you can go around to the other areas such as Bloodpool or Itos, Cassandora, but you actually can't do anything in them yet because they actually have a minimum level for you to do anything in them. For instance, in Bloodpool you need to be level 2. You need to tackle Fillmore first, and honestly I'm kind of glad about that due to some musical stuff. So let's head right on in and handle the monsters. Sir Moyle, if we destroy all monsters in this land, people will be able to live here again. Are we ready? Ready? Yes. May luck be with you. Fillmore Act 1's theme is one of the best themes to come out of the early Super Nintendo. I love this track, and I do mean early Super Nintendo, by the way, because for those who are unaware, ActRaiser was one of the launch titles for the Super Nintendo, if I recall correctly, and God, they really showed quality quickly. Either way, starting off, the controls for the action stages are what you would expect. B is jump, Y is your attack, so on and so forth. A does something, but we can't do it yet. And as for the HUD, the hearts up there are your extra lives, the blue bars are your hit points, most enemies only do 1 damage. Time is obvious, if you run out of time, you take a death. And score is actually rather important in this game. Also, hi Freddy Krueger for some reason. Score influences something during the other portion of the game that happens in between the action stages. More on that later, but more or less for this stage, we want to reach about 20,000 points by the end of the stage. More accurately, I think like 20,600. You don't need to do that, honestly. You're probably better off in the long run if you probably just get around 10,000. But I do want to reach 20,600. Well, actually, no, I want to reach roughly 15,000 by a certain point in the stage, because the boss gives you stage points, as do some other things at the end of the stage. But what I'm about to do right now is just run back and forth through the areas I've been through in the stage already before falling down there to reach a certain point threshold. I do take a death by time eventually, but the cool thing is about this is you may have seen earlier, I got a 1-up from one of the little item pedestals. Those respawn after death, so you can just do this area over and over again. And here I am at around 15,000. At this point, I'm just going to continue on because I can get the rest of the points needed as we go through. Items you'll find in the stages are generally points themselves, which are indicated by 500 or 1,000 increments. Apples in either half apple forms or full apples, which restore a certain amount of life points, I think. Full apples are always full HP restores. There are bombs shaped like little bells that rarely show up unless you're playing on the higher difficulty you unlock after beating the game, which just destroy all enemies on screen. There's a couple other items, but those don't come into play until later, so I'll talk about those then. For now, it's time for our first boss, a Centaur. Centaur only has 2 attacks. To charge into you with his spear, in which case just run away and duck when he gets close enough. And this little lightning attack, which goes at far and then, well, I guess more of a mid and then short distance. He never leaves the grass, so if you just stand on the left side and slash him when he's not attacking you outright, you can take him out pretty easily. If he tries to charge at you, just duck. In fact, if you duck from right here and attack while doing so, you can get a lot of good quick hits in. First boss, he's going to be pretty easy. He can do damage pretty quickly if you're trying to keep him to a wall instead of staying to a wall yourself. But on the whole, not a bad boss fight. At the end of a stage, not only do you get points for beating the boss, but you also get points for your time, basically a time bonus. and then 1,000 points for each extra life, thus that'll take me over the 20,000 mark that I need. And with that, the meat of the game begins. Turmoil. Fillmore may become a land where people can live in peace. Our first duty is to protect our people from any monsters. I will do as you instruct. Please rid the land of these arrows with my monsters with my arrows. There are several mysterious circles on the ground which represent monsters' lairs. If you direct people correctly, they'll be able to seal the lairs. You will discover that the monster that controls this land. If destroyed, control of this land's destiny will return to her people. Alright, my master. Let us work towards peace. Sir Moyle, I know it's unexpected, but our people in Fillmore have something to tell you. My master, we are having a difficult time building homes because of many bushes. Please burn the bushes and guide us as we begin to build our roads. The meat of ActRaiser is in this sim mode where we play as the cherub. You move around, directing the people to build towards certain directions and such. Although before I do anything, I do want to head back and save. Because the way I handle generally the game in this is that I do the action stage as a recording, the sim mode as a recording, and then what happens afterwards is a recording, then that's one part. What you want to start off to do is build your town in certain directions, generally towards these monster layers. Every area, your goal more or less in sim mode is just to increase the population of the people, which not only will allow you to access the second action stage that each region has, but also to increase your player's level, which will not only increase your HP, but will increase the SP there in the top right. The numbers in the top right, or I guess generally the top right in general, the hourglass is your timer, more or less. I think it's supposed to indicate years or days. Either way, populations in town construction will commence once the bottom is filled. The numbers in the top right, the blue number on the left of it is your town's population currently in the region you're in. The blue number on the top right, in general, is the world population. So there's 6 people in the town over 6 in the world. What I just did there is lightning. You need to pull miracles to either destroy things in the way of your population's building, or in the case you want to destroy some of the enemies around. The gold number on the top right is your SP. I think that stands for soul or spirit points. I forget exactly which. And you need those to perform miracles, so you're gonna need to get that pretty quickly. You restore it either by the town getting constructed in general, or by destroying some of the monsters. Either the napper bats that are all around, who like to kidnap, I think, at least 4 citizens at a time, or the dragons who will just try to destroy a town. And the people have something else to tell us. Our master, we have finally mastered the skill of hunting animals. We now have enough confidence to fight monsters. Please lead us to the monster's lair. If you direct the people into a monster's lair when you have 10 or more population in a region, they can steal the lair. And the reason that you want to get certain points within a stage is actually because of the layers themselves. Because the more points you have, I think it's 50 per, another monster is added to a specific layer. And that's good because the souls of monsters are what get converted into population. Sir Moyle, people have sealed the monster's lair without our help. It appears that someone has found something in the monster's lair. My master, we have found a strange statue. We present this to you as an offering. Please accept it. Offerings are found at set points, generally from destroying monsters' lairs or by them reaching certain points in the map. For instance, here's a bomb. That just destroys any enemies during the sim area that are around. The reason you want to reach that certain score, though, is because the max population in an area can only be reached if you get a certain score combined between the first and second action stages within a region. That's why I said you don't need to get all 20,000 during the first stage, but for flow reasons, it's easier for me to do so, and so I don't have to, say, get 10,000 in the first action stage, then 10,000 in the second, and wait in between. This allows me to get all the sim mode stuff more or less done at once. One thing you do want to do, though, is, first off, get as many roads done as you can, because that just makes the map look better. But also, make sure nothing gets destroyed. My master, recently strange things have been happening to me. Many of my thoughts actually come to life in the real world. If these powers are real, I feel the presence of something holy radiating from the woods east of here. That's the one to the east of the temple. I'll get on that eventually. The cornfields there are support structures. Essentially, for every certain amount of people, a support structure is needed in order to support their life. In the case with cornfields, I think it's 36 people per cornfield. And the houses right now are level 1 houses. I think they hold 4 people each. The more monster layers you destroy, the civilization level of an area will grow, but we'll get into what that does later. For right now, your major concern is just sealing the 3 monster layers on this side of the river and getting rid of all the trees and even some of the rocks in the bottom right corner to clear the pathway for more houses. Oh, this is a thing. My master, a fire has broken out in the home in the north. Please send rain to quench the fire. I can't do that because I don't have the SP for it because I've been destroying so many trees. So those houses are going to burn down. I'm going to lose some population, but it doesn't matter too much. However, this does indicate our first instance of population stopping. There are, I think, 5 kinds of population growth in the town areas of ActRaiser. There's none, which is generally only seen before you tackle the first action stage of a given region. There is normal, which is just normal. There's slow, which happens if the soul counter, which is indicated by the amount of monsters you've destroyed in the temple, is either just low or after you've reached max population before clearing the second action stage of a region. But then there's stop, which in a few instances, events will just cause your population to stop growing. That fire is one of them, but it's a temporary one because it solves itself after a while anyway. And the civilization level is improved. They'll now build level 2 houses, which I think hold 6 people. There's also a max population growth, which means that you've just reached max population in that area and no one else can grow. Sir Moyle, destroying that big rock below the precipice has revealed something that may be very useful. Your people have something to say. Our master, a magic token was found near the precipice to the southeast of here. We present it to you as an offering. Please accept it. I'll generally be picking up offerings as it goes, though I do want to destroy these rocks, even though I don't think these actually have to be destroyed for anything in the game. Going more into population growth, though, every area has a starting population count just based off the amount of monsters that are in the layer to start if you get a minimum score in the stage. I think in the case with Fillmore, there's always going to be a max population of 500. However, because I got a score of 20,600, we had to divide that by 50. Essentially, I think 400 souls to the enemy layers, which means a total of 400 added enemies. Also, we leveled up. That happens when you reach a certain max population in the world. And it not only increases your HP for both the Cherub and the Knight, or I guess Master during the action stages, it also increases your max SP, as well as refills it, so that makes area management a bit better when it comes to building structures or getting rid of certain things as well. You generally, I think, will reach, I want to say, level 4 with getting max population in this area before the second action stage. Alright, what you want to do right now is avoid the river tiles. More on why later, but it is very important to not touch the river tiles until we have a certain thing happen. Because something every map in this game has is a structure limit. Essentially, counting houses, support structures like the cornfields, and some other things, you can only have a total of 128 objects in a map. Roads do not count for that, but it is important to keep note of that because sometimes the structural limit can get in the way of getting max population if you do things incorrectly. Well, not incorrectly, because technically speaking, you don't need max population. You can beat the game just fine without it. But if you're going for it, a structure limit can become quite an issue in at least the first 2 areas. Because the major limiting factors when it comes to getting max populations is not only the size of the map and the structures you can build in it, but also the soul counts I mentioned earlier, basically the amount of enemies you kill. Because essentially, I don't think I've summarized it like this. The way that enemies work is that each enemy you kill, see the little white dot there? That's going to the temple, that's a soul. Every enemy can be converted into a person. Oh, they have something else to tell us. My master, we have developed a fishing trade here in Fillmore. A few days ago, a fisherman repairing his boat along the seashore found an unusual scroll. We present this to you as an offering. Please accept it. That is going to be our first magic spell. More on that in a moment after they seal this monster lair. So I'm just going to kill that dragon too. And they seal another monster lair. Great. And they found something in it again. Now, Master, we have found a strange bow and some arrows. We present this to you as an offering. Please accept it. That is a strength of the angel. More on that in a moment. Thank you, Master. We have acquired a new skill and can now build bridges. With a way to cross the river, we can build homes over there. Bridges are one of the biggest pains in the asses in this game trying to get max population because they count towards the structure limit, so you can only have a certain amount of bridges in the stage before it starts impacting your population. First, let's go grab the offerings we got. Strength of the Angel basically multiplies your cherub's arrow strength by 4, insta-killing most enemies. Bridges are more or less going to be for something later on. The Source of Magic is what's important, because that raises our MP total to use spells. And this one's very important. The lightning bolt you just sent smashed a huge rock. We found a magical fire spell underneath the rock. Spells are something you use during the action stages with the A button. Each of them costs 1 MP in the American version. They cost various amounts in Japanese. Like, I know the best spell in the game costs 3 in Japan. Fireballs, basically, you send, I think, fireballs in front of you to damage enemies. It's going to be somewhat useful. The second spell in the game is generally the one you're going to see me using the most, but I'm going to show them all off anyway. Essentially, though, what we want to be careful with now is building towards the river. We can build along the river, like, say, with this vertical section here. We can build up alongside it, but we shouldn't build into it, because in order to reach max population in Fillmore, you can only have, I think, 1 bridge. So you need to be very careful about where you place it so that you don't accidentally build too many bridges and then go over your structure limit, meaning your population will just be screwed with getting max. Though I should mention, even though population impacts your level, first off, you can never revert in level. So say if people die and you go below a level threshold, you'll still be like level 5 if you reach level 5. But also, you don't need to reach max population to reach max level. There is leeway, not much leeway, but there is leeway enough to the point where you don't need to worry too much about it. In terms of the structure limits for this area, though, the max amount of houses you can get in Fillmore when you reach max population, I think, is 114. That leaves 13 supporting structures, or in this case, basically 13 cornfields, and 1 minimum bridge. My master, may I inform you that a scroll was found in the woods east of here. We present it to you as an offering. Please accept our gift. I believe that's another MP, so we have 2. Yep. MP is very important because spells are just going to make bosses that much easier. I do admit, I do abuse magic to some extent during bosses, especially the second spell. But you don't need to worry too much. Because there are ways to beat bosses without it. Either way, this is me taking care of some road stuff, I believe. Or actually, no, it's just me placing myself properly. Because now, I believe, is when we want to start building alongside the river so that we can build the 1 bridge. At this point, I believe I'm going to head towards the south. I do apologize for being a bit, I guess, sloppy is the word for it, with this first flow, I guess, for this first sim section. I hadn't played the game in a while, and when I wrote my notes, I wrote them in a bit of a weird way, so I had trouble comprehending where I wanted to build and when. Either way, now we want to build alongside the river so we don't build a bridge over it. Go left here, and then down to build the only bridge in Fillmore on that tile there. However, you still need to be careful because if you build across, or to the right in the case with the area here on the left with the last monster layer, I guess to the right rather, you will build another bridge, so you need to be very careful and make sure that you build as many houses as possible before going across there, because we still will be crossing those rivers just to get the roads built, but we need to make sure the roads are built without any bridges. Notable, I should mention this though, when we eventually get towards maximum population, which we want to make sure we have as many houses as we can before we do that, you can only reach 906 people out of the 914 during your first visit here, even after clearing both stages, due to a mechanic I'll get into next part, that only a few areas in the game have to begin with. Admittedly, sim mode, especially when you get to this point, does become a lot of waiting because you only have 1 enemy to take care of, and they're just working on their own when it comes to the people. Later on, particularly in part 2 onwards, I will be fast-forwarding when appropriate. Hey, 88 SP, that's good if I could use it. I should note you can still use SP when you don't have to destroy anything. Like, I think the wind ability in particular will come in handy in the case you want to blow away any airborne enemies. It's essentially a bomb that costs SP, which could be useful. It's just the fact that it's not really worth using at this point, given the fact I only have dragons left. Also, if you press, I think, the B button when you're directly on top of a monster layer, it'll actually tell you not only the name of the enemies in there, but also how many of them are left. which is notable because that'll at least give you a hint towards what your max population is with your current score. I should note, though, because at this point I've said it a couple times, the second action stage happens when, eventually, it only happens after you've taken care of all 4 monster layers within an area. And that might make it seem like you can't get the max population anymore, but the thing is, the souls that are added, or I guess enemies that are added from your score, only really matter during the first sim section. Because the soul counter is added to the monster layers at that point, but say if I got 10,000 points in the first stage and I got 10,000 set points during the second stage. Those 200 souls in that case would be added directly to the soul counter in the temple, meaning they'll just be immediately converted into population, not into monsters, then into population. I apologize if I'm a bit confused, if I'm saying this a bit confusingly. There's a surprising amount to say about this game early on, and the mechanics can seem a bit confusing at first. I openly admit. This is a game that probably takes some time to learn. I think at this point I've played this game upwards of 10 times, 3 of which were max population runs. And there's just a lot to talk about because this game has a surprising amount of depth despite what it looks like. Now, in terms of my origins with this game, I think this was one of the first games I can say I ever got introduced to through YouTube. Because some of you might be aware of a channel that hasn't gotten updates in a while, actually, at this point, called Clan of the Grey Wolf. They had a series called 16-Bit Gems, where they covered generally lesser-known or underappreciated games from the Sega Genesis, TurboGrafx 16, Super Nintendo era, all that jazz. And I think their 8th episode, upwards of, I want to say, 9 years ago now, roughly 2009 area, was on ActRaiser, and I thought the game looked interesting, so I tried it out, and I fell in love. And that's the last monster layer down. And the civilization level is now improved to 3. The houses can now hold 8 people. Come, my master. Since the last layer has been sealed, something strange has been happening to me. I have the same nightmare every night. In my nightmare, the gruesome monster Minotaurus appears through the big hole to the southeast. He says he'll curse the people with death. Because of my ability to see into the future, I feel as if I'm already being afflicted by that monster's curse. Please, my master, go down into the ground and destroy this gruesome monster before something terrible happens. And with that, since we've cleared the last monster layer, the second action stage is now available to us. However, we're not going into it for a bit still, because I want to max the population as much as I can before we head into there. More or less, this just comes down to not only filling out the rest of the areas and getting as many houses in there as possible, but also when it comes to the third element of getting this. You see, since we have level 3 houses now, we actually had to outright destroy prior areas so that those level 1 and 2 houses can be replaced with level 3 houses and therefore overall improve our population. Like, I'm looking at this. The square I'm over right now has 4 level 1 houses and 1 level 2 house. That is 22 houses. Those 5 houses are now going to be replaced with level 3 houses, basically putting, I think, like 50 people in 1 square. This starts the tedious process of destroying houses that are level 1 and 2 to replace them with level 3 and wait for them to be rebuilt. This is probably like 5 or 6 minutes of footage sped up just to make it a bit faster on ourselves. And it's the most tedious part of the game, but it is very important to do this when you're going for max population. Also, while it might seem stupid to be destroying the support units like the cornfields right now, you don't need to worry about that at this point when you reach level 3, because these purple houses are mansions, and they are the civilization level 3's support structures. I think they support 72 people versus the cornfields 32, so it's overall more worth it to destroy the cornfields and have them be replaced with these more efficient things. And we're about at the point where we reach max population. In most areas at that point where I reach max population, I would move the building grid around just to complete the road grids, just because it looks better to me. However, I do not recommend doing that at this point in Fillmore, because you might have noticed I mentioned the max population for this area is 914. And due to a mechanic this game has that I mentioned earlier even that I'll go over next part, we cannot actually technically get max population at this point, not only until after we beat the second action stage, but also not until a certain other element happens in between parts. So for right now, it's time for our second action stage. Equip this, and Sir Moyle, if we destroy the monsters in this area, people will no longer be scared of evil. Time for the second action stage. And yes, I'm going to be quiet for that every single time because I just love that sequence. It's a combination of the admittedly dated Mode 7 and just the musical swell is awesome to me. And sadly, we don't get the Fillmore theme back here. Like I mentioned before, if you do what I do during this LP, you don't need to worry about your score during each area's second action stage. However, say you want to divide it into half and you went for like 10,000 or so during the first action stage of Fillmore, or any other region rather, you would need to get the other half during this stage. So if I went for like 10,300 during the first half, I need to match it here. Like I said before, even though it requires me going back and forth through the areas of the first action stages and dying a couple times due to time loss, the respawning 1-ups and overall simpler layouts just make it better in my eyes to get the max population score during the first stage and then just stroll through the second stage as quickly as I can and kick ass during it rather than doing it half and half. Now, something I'm actually curious about, because I'm surprised I've never looked this up, is an ActRaiser speedrun. I know I look up generally the speedruns in every area, every game I play nowadays, but I'm actually curious about this, because I've seen an ActRaiser 2 speedrun. I'll go over my thoughts on ActRaiser 2 eventually. But I've never seen ActRaiser 1. You don't need to worry about spikes in this area, I believe. I don't think they're instant kill, but in general, as with a lot of games that worry about spikes in a lot of areas, they will probably kill you in one shot. It's honestly kind of inconsistent. Wonderfully inconsistent, even. Let's see, ActRaiserSpeedrun.com. Any percent record is just under an hour, 100%, an hour and a half. Honestly, I could see that being very feasible. Because not only will they probably not be going for max score in areas, they just get the monster layers out of the way. Makes sense. The biggest threat in terms of this level, though, is probably just a lot of enemies potentially blindsiding if you're trying to rush through it. Even though on the whole, admittedly, the thing that's kind of, I guess, good about this game is that you don't need to worry about most of the major enemies in a stage, because usually the highest amount of shots it'll take to take out is 3. Most enemies only take 1, if not 2. But it's time for us to face the Minotaurus, and the pattern for this boss is pretty simple. He jumps up in the air, lands behind you, and throws an axe. So what you want to react to that is walk the opposite direction, jump over his axe, and then take some shots at him. Rinse, repeat in the opposite direction until he dies. You could use the spells at this point, but honestly, I just don't find it worth using because he's on the ground for so little time that he won't take too many shots from it. But overall, honestly, I find it about as hard as the Centaur was back in the first action stage. And with that, that's Fillmore more or less all wrapped up. Still gotta come back here for one quick thing around the middle of the next part or so, but not too bad. It's a good introductory stage for the game. Nice and wide open. Alright, what do they have for us? Master, Fillmore is now rid of all monsters. Sadly, one person was afflicted by the monster's curse and has just passed away. Right before he passed away, he was able to say, "I was finally able to be of some help to the people of Fillmore. With the elimination of all monsters, we can now control the town by ourselves. So, please visit other lanes and make them as peaceful as our town, Fillmore. There are people praising you outside of this shrine." A nice little detail, they also changed the way the shrine looks after you beat Act 1. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we'll be heading over to the next region and taking care of its sim mode, its action stages, all that kind of jazz, because that's generally the flow I'm going to try and have this LP go for, is finish one region within one video. See you guys then.